Good afternoon, everyone. It's Daishion Miller, and we're here with this week's Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday. I apologize to those of you catching this live, running a few minutes late. We had some technical glitches in the process, but here we are, ready to go. Okay, we're going to jump right into it. This week's training is on taking a look at the elbows. And I'm going to point here because when people think of elbows, this is what they think, right? But there's a statement or a quote or something like that, right, from a long, long time ago, right? And that quote says, "Those who are ignorant of history are bound to repeat it." I'm sure you've heard that one, right? But in the martial arts, those who are ignorant of history have a different problem, right? Where what ends up happening is they end up guessing. They end up coming up with their own ideas based on their own logic, their own experience, their own education and whatnot. And what they do is they make a bunch of assumptions about how things work, okay? My teachers always warned me about this because it's hard enough to translate something, right, that came in from a different country, right? So we're going to try to translate Japanese thinking and culture and that kind of thing, right, into something that somebody in the English-speaking world can understand. Here in the US, Canada, UK, Australia, whatever. We have our own little cultural twist on things. The same words don't mean the same thing, right? Umbrella, bumper shoot, whatever, right? Okay. So it's hard enough to translate and know what someone's talking about when we're talking about this kind of thing, right? It's even more difficult if we're trying to translate something from another culture, from a completely different time that the modern people in that culture can't translate well. Go back just in this country, right? If we were to go back to, let's say, 1850, right? And then look at the way the documents are written and how people hand wrote things and the words that they speak and whatnot, right? A lot of it, you got to try to get your head wrapped around and sort it out and learn that lowercase s's during the time of our American Civil War were written like we would write, almost like we would write lowercase f's, right? So that's just one little spinoff, right? Looking at, Shakespeare way back, right? It's almost unintelligible today because the syntax is off, the words are off, that kind of stuff, right? So we can go to, Renaissance fairs and we can fantasize about things and whatnot, but in most cases, we're missing 90% of the data, right? So here's something, right? We're going to start with the elbows, right? Elbow, right? Everybody knows what an elbow is, okay? If you look up the word in a Japanese to English dictionary, English to Japanese dictionary, today, the word for elbow is hiji. Hiji. But we don't have a hiji-ken. We don't have an elbow weapon, elbow fist, whatever, okay? You don't, right? In our scrolls, what we have is shuki-ken, okay? Now, I'm going to violate some of my own little principles and whatnot, and I'm not going to bother to translate some of these things today conventionally word for word because there's something that's more important, right? One of my teachers likes to remind us that here's the name of the kata, but I'm not going to tell you what it means because you're going to get your head all wrapped around the meaning and ego is going to jump ahead and play a bunch of games. Meanwhile, what really matters is the action that you have to master, okay? So in today's world, right, my funky drawing here again, right? Just a hand, right? Forearm, upper arm, whatever, right? So in today's world, if somebody mentions elbow, all focus goes there. Yes? Okay? All focus goes right here. Okay? Or somewhere in this region right here because, well, everybody knows what an elbow is. Okay? I was just teaching a class last night, and we were doing this one kata from the Shinden Furoryu that has what people would look at and see, well, that's a hip throw, right? We're using our hip because in the descriptions of a lot of these kata, there's this word that shows up, koshi. In today's world, right? Koshi, dictionary, right? Hip, right? Hip. Well, everybody knows what a hip is. Your mama taught you what a hip was, right? It's this part right here. Except that in ancient Japan, Pre-Admiral Perry landing, I know, I may be old and fat, but I've done my research, right? Pre-Admiral Perry landing in Japan and bringing Western anatomical designations for the body, how the Japanese saw regions of the body was very, very different. So if we're looking at something and it says ashi means leg or foot, how the hell can ashi mean leg or foot? It's either a leg or it's a foot. We understand that, right? Different. Okay. So I'm going to keep this here. I'm just going to change color. Let's do Chuck. We'll do brown. Okay. So pre-Admiral Perry, which is when our scrolls were written, which is when these kata were developed. Okay. Shuki, right? Again, sometimes it's translated as elbow gun, whatever, okay? But it doesn't matter. The definition of this word does not matter if you don't know what they're talking about. Because if I give you a definition, just like we talk about this in Mikyo, if I give you a definition or if I tell you the point of a meditative exercise, ego will jump ahead and fake it. Okay? So not knowing what the hell we're talking about can be a bigger detriment to our learning and training and have us completely unprepared for this jackwagon when he comes than to actually like only train with a couple of techniques or not train at all. Okay. So hiji. Okay. The joint itself. Yes. Shuki. Okay. Went from here to here. That whole region. Okay. So in module 1 of our black belt program, regardless of whether you're doing it in the academy or you're doing it online, right? In module 1, we have a technique where there's a hook punch coming in and we do this strike with the forearm, which everybody sees as what? A karate high block, right? We do this thing. It's a very Tagagi Yoshin-like technique, okay? Where it locks the spine, all that kind of stuff. Tagagi Yoshin Shinden Fudo-like kind of thing, because the purpose of that module is not to teach historical kata. It's to get people prepared to handle the most common attacks that happen and are most likely to happen to you 95 to 98% of the time. Not based on my belief system, based on actual crime statistics across the Western world. So how about if we start there, okay? So we're striking mid-forearm, which is also shuki. This is what throws people off because they want a name for everything, right? They want a name for everything, okay? So we're striking with this, and then we're doing the takedown. Not rarely, right? Which means more often than not, I will have somebody that has prior experience in Bujinkan, Ninjutsu, whatever, right? Who will say, this art doesn't have karate high blocks. To which my answer is, we're not doing a karate high block. We're doing a strike with shuki ken to the incoming arm. It's still uke nagashi. It's a strike. Okay? Could we just jam it up and block? Of course. We're going to take a look at more uses for the elbow, for this region. We got to get this out of the way. We're going to do more. We're going to look at more purposes than just slamming somebody. Okay? So it could just be a wall. It could just be a jamming kind of thing where they run into it and it's a shield, much like being in Hoku no Kamae. Okay? So if we can't get this right, then anytime we run into the word shuki in a kata description, what are we going to think? We're going to think, right? Same thing. So again, last night's class, we're doing this throw, right? But at no point do I say we're doing a hip throw. At no point do I say we're entering with the hips or anything like that, okay? Because, let me back up far enough here, okay? Koshi, in the old days, was not just this region that mommy taught you was your hip. Koshi ran from here to just at the bottom of the thigh muscle, just before the support or the stabilizer muscles at the top and around the kneecap, okay? Because in Budo Taijutsu, in Ninpo Taijutsu, we don't use the hip. because to use the hip, like you see in judo and stuff like, it throws the spine and the skeleton out of position and it compromises things. Okay. So if we don't get this right, then everything that follows from this will be wrong or at best broken because we're trying to make something happen that was not the original intent. So again, being ignorant of history can really piss up. Okay. So that's the place to start. Right. So when we're talking about Shukiken, does that mean that we're never talking about the knob that everybody says is your elbow? Of course not, right? It's a part of it because, again, it runs from here, right, here to here. Then kote, then pei, then yubi. Fingers, okay? So they're regions. Sometimes in some of the lineages, they spell out specifically what you're going to hit, specifically what you're going to use. In other descriptions, it just says strike this, right? Or like in Koto Ryu, it'll say strike kimo, right? In the Gyoko Ryu, it says strike the chest. Well, where on the chest? Well, at that level of ability, you're supposed to know, okay? So while there's some vagueness, that's for upper level people who know if I'm lined up for this and the strike, not just hitting the point, but the angle of it and the weapon that will access that the best from my position is the one that makes that happen because the kata is going to tell you what happens next. Well, if what I do doesn't put him in position for that next follow-up, well, then it wasn't right. No matter how much I want to twist it and make it right and go, well, that's just my style. Okay. In one of the dojo in Japan, calling something your style when they say that's your style is usually accompanied with laughter. Okay. So when I say elbows today, anytime I'm talking about elbows, could point to anything, any area related. That's the word area, right? Area 51. No, related to this region. Okay. So which one specifically? Which one? Okay. So again, what I want to do today is just take a look at more reasons to strike than than just striking. But to make our list complete, let's start there. Okay. Okay. Can we strike with the elbow? Well, yeah, that's what everybody thinks of, right? Hit him in the head, slam him with this thing, right? Okay. I'm going to strike, right? Let's just get that out of the way. Okay. We can also apply leverage. Okay. If you've ever done one of those little like leverage takedown kind of things, right? Where I'm using the inside of the Shuki region, this side, right? To lever on the inside of their wrist to pull the hand arm to me and then lever through with this side, right? And I know everybody wants to snap it and all that kind of stuff, but okay. So we can leverage, right? We can also catch, right? Dori. Okay. I don't have to snap that, right? Which requires striking. I don't have to drag him to the ground. I could just catch it for a moment that causes him to end up in a slightly off position. Then I can move into that next piece, right? The more things we have, I heard this quote a long, long time ago. It's been mirrored in using other words with my teachers in this art, but I heard it originally outside of martial arts. And it has to do with success. The more options you have in any given moment, the greater your chances of success. We'll talk about that in a minute, okay? So I can catch, right? I can also guard, okay? Guarding could be touching, could not be touching, okay? I could guard. Today's session, I'm going to give some for instances, right, physically, but to do it the most justice with a couple of examples and things like that, right? That's what we do on these Friday virtual training classes, right? So again, we can strike, right? Conventional stuff, right? We're hitting, we're slamming, could even be, the way people think of these karate high blocks and things like that, especially from like a hard karate, right? Where it's this, but it's not a block, right? It's not a block. It's either, if we're thinking about blocking, it's either a jamming kind of action, but even so, we're going to talk. One of the other things I'm going to talk about today is ways to look at your fists so that they're not so damn limiting. They're not limited, okay? Because there's this cool secret within Ninjutsu, okay, about virtually every fist that we have that takes our brain away from have fist will punch or have fist will strike, have foot will kick, that kind of thing, right? And again, it expands it. The greater the options in any given moment, in this case, the greater options with every tool we have, the greater our chances of success, because the more things we'll be able to do. A strike does something specific to him. There's impact to the body, right? Yes, it breaks balance like a bunch of other things does, but there's something about that, right? Leveraging, right? There's no impact, but the way we leverage it can sometimes create the same thing, but it can create other options as well, okay? It's kind of like when we're using language, okay? For those of you who are not native speakers, this might have been difficult to learn, but for native speakers, it's also difficult to learn because they don't think about it, okay? People like to fall back on those were not the words I used. But the reality is that 85% of human communication has nothing to do with the words that we use. Only 15%, give or take, right? Studies vary by 3 to 5%, but about 15% of our communication with any other human being, only 15% are the words we use, right? If you have kids, especially teenagers, right? Now, cop an attitude toward you and you go, watch the attitude. And they'll go, what? All I said was, and they'll repeat the words, but there's a whole bunch missing. And what do you say? That's not what you said. I heard the words, but that's not what you said. Okay. So it's really cool, right? If you can get a handle on this rhythm and this kind of a timing, rhythm, inflection kind of thing, it goes along with force and power when we're doing techniques. If you can make the correlation, if you can make the jump, you'll understand how this works, okay? So when we speak, right, there's 3 basic inflections. There's something with a rise at the end, there's something with a dip at the end, and there's something that's flat, okay? So if I say, let's see, if I say, are you enjoying this episode? Okay. I know you heard the words and you infer things, but if I say, right, are you enjoying this episode? There's a certain inflection to that, right? That's a question. Okay. That's very different than if I say, let's see, are you enjoying this episode? Okay. That, again, it kind of wishy-washy, right? But it's starting to become more forceful. So if I say, enjoy this episode, now it's a command, it's an imperative, that kind of thing, right? Or if I say, are you enjoying this episode? It's very flat, right? Or you are enjoying this episode. If I say, you're enjoying this episode, you're enjoying this episode? You are enjoying this episode. This is a statement. Okay. So again, what the hell does that have to do with martial arts, Sensei? Okay. There's a lot more things that have to do with martial arts than most people think of because, and again, I could say it's not their fault, but if they stop with learning from one person and all they're focusing on is wanting to learn skills, wanting to learn moves, and wanting to learn kata and collecting things like they have a coin collection or a stamp collection, yeah, kind of is their fault because they're going to seek out and find a teacher who gives them what they want, because that's, even if that's, I mean, if that's not all the teacher has to give and the teacher wants to step beyond that and really help them learn, most students, 98.8% of students are going to wander off and find somebody else who will give them exactly what they want because they think they know what it takes to survive a murderous, enraged individual coming at them, right? Or to fit the fantasy based on movies or whatever. Okay. So we're going to seek out the instructor, right? Or we don't know any better and we don't ask the right questions. So when a teacher's teaching these things and we have these little moments come up, we might either assume that he'll give us the other stuff later or that this is all there is. Okay. So we constantly have to be minding mind, right? Which is why, we've got eco training and all that kind of stuff going on. But either way, right? So if we just stay here, right, there's going to be some other things that pop up along the way, right? Because elbows can also be used for distraction. These are almost every one of these things. No, I take that back. All of these things are in our kihon in some fashion. We just have to know what to look for. If we don't know what to look for, we're just going to see what we see and that's it. Okay? So we have to be careful. Okay? So striking is pretty obvious, right? But I'm going to put a twist on striking. Okay? I'm going to add something right here. It can also be a strike backup. Okay? It can also be a strike backup, right? So we'll start here and I'll give you an example of what I mean. Okay? So in ninjutsu, in Ninpo Taijutsu, yes, you can strike with the elbows, but we tend to deliver attacks in the blind spot while he's busy doing something else. So he can't escape, he can't resist, he can't avoid, he can't counter, those kind of things, right? That's what the sanshin are all about, right? It's about penetration. How do we penetrate his defenses and land our shot in a way that he can't counter, resist, escape, whatever, okay? So, but most people don't see that because they stop at step 1, step 2, step 3. Got it. I'll practice that every day. Well, great. Okay. That's like getting really, really good at making the big letter A like you did in kindergarten, but we're not going to do anything else with it. Okay. So what do I mean by straight backup? Okay. In Ninpo Taijutsu, the elbow is seen or is delivered as a redirected missed punch. So throw a strike, he slips to avoid. I have a second opportunity to strike him by simply changing the plane of my arm. I'm going to do it facing you now because that angle hides things. The problem with two-dimensional video like this, I don't care if you're in the room, it's also the same problem that people have in the dojo. And sometimes students get kind of frustrated because they want to go and practice, right? They saw the technique. You did it like 2 or 3 times. You don't need to do it again. But I always rearrange my partner, whether we're filming or recording or whether we're actually demonstrating live. I always change angle. And the reason I do that is because 99% of my students don't move. When I go to Japan and we train in Hombu or any dojo, everybody picks their spot. And then when the teacher calls us back, they gravitate to this spot. And they always watch the technique from a two-dimensional plane because that's all you can see. You can't see from this way. You can't see from all the other 8 or 9 or 10 or 27 or whatever directions, perspectives. You can't see it from there. So I change angle because if we don't do that, what you see is what you see here, and then you assume the rest. Good luck with that. Okay, so I'm going to do this again because the other angle made it look like the elbow stayed on the same line. But it doesn't. If he shifts to the outside of my arm to avoid this punch and I level this out, I just added, what is that? On me, it's about 8 inches. Okay, I can still clip him or get close enough to break his positioning so that it causes a momentary lapse where he has to recover to come back in, and I have an open window. Okay? So, yes, you can start here. Okay? Baby training, lots of training wheels. But we can also do it as a strike backup. Okay? All right? Leverage, we'll take a look at that. That's better seen when like you're watching a technique or whatever, okay? But what I'll tell you is that when most people do leveraging with their elbows, right? So the elbow, the shuki, right? this section, not necessarily the elbow itself. It could be, but they're using this, right? Okay. They tend to miss their mark and they just do it harder or they do it faster, which is caveman fighting. Okay. I call this point right here the Musodori point. Okay. It's the back end of the knob. Okay. Because again, when most people think of the elbow, right, we're going to do an arm bar. We're going to attack the elbow. Okay. What are we talking about? Are we talking about the knob or point of the elbow? You know that thing that mommy and grandma told you was the elbow? But it's not. Right? It's the end of a bone section called your ulna. It's the end of a bone. So if I'm down here wrestling around in this thing, I'm going to have a harder time locking that joint or doing the affecting things because I'm at a strong point on their arm. And I'm allowing them to use these big muscle groups to fight mine. Whoever has the bigger muscle group has the advantage. Okay. What I want to do is fit to Sun Tzu's Art of War and the chapter on using strong points against weak points. If I'm fighting his muscles based on my muscle size and he's got the bigger muscles, I can't fight using strong points against weak points because I'm fighting apples to apples. Okay. But if I know that the elbow joint is the space between the ulna radial bone connection in here, but specifically in here, the space before the humerus, you know, the funny bone, before that starts, this gap right here, there's a space. You have connective tissue holding this stuff together. I'm attacking. When I'm attacking an elbow, I'm attacking the space. I'm attacking the joint itself. And so it requires precision. Okay. So if I'm here, right, and I lever, he's going to have a hard time fighting that because I'm making him work with the connective tissue and the muscles that are at the anchor points, not the big guns. Okay. It's very, very different. Okay. So, but here's a problem when people are doing leverage. Okay. See if we can set this up so you can see this. Okay. Let's say I catch this point. I actually have it. Okay. If you've ever done this to somebody and they didn't quite break or fall or whatever, okay, you need to look at what you're doing and how you're doing it. Okay? I made reference to this on a YouTube short that I just posted yesterday. It's like 3 tips for non-fighters, that kind of thing. But at the very end, maybe it wasn't that one. It was the one the day before. Either way, right? A lot of people are knocking my videos because they can't take me seriously. Some can't take me seriously because they're calling me Santa and all those other really. Some have come up with some pretty cool names that I haven't heard. Made me laugh. Anyway, right? So, but they can't take me seriously because I'm not demonstrating at speed. This shit is designed to break a human body apart in the fewest moves possible. If we go at speed, stuff breaks. So what I left them with is, if you're pounding the crap out of somebody and they're not breaking with every strike delivery, every leverage, if they're not breaking, we can't have a conversation because we're talking about 2 completely different things. You're playing grog, not you. They're playing grog, trying to hammer somebody as many times as possible because it feels like work, man. It feels like you're doing stuff. But you can't beat somebody bigger, stronger, faster, mountainous, whatever, with that kind of tactic. That's why we learn to hit very specific weak points and go after things, right? Because this is a Kyusho. Not a pressure point, a weak point. Kyusho does not mean pressure point. Look at the old, one of the original Whiteboard Wednesdays that we did where I covered Kyusho, right? 4 or 5 different types of Kyusho without touching for medical purposes, right? Okay. So it's a weak point. It takes 15 pounds per square inch to blow out an adult elbow. You don't have to be pounding on somebody to do that. So if I'm doing something and and I'm struggling with it, one of 2 things are off. I'm either positioned incorrectly Or there's this other thing that's happening. I'm not applying proper leverage. Okay? You know what a seesaw is, right? Teeter-totter, whatever. Okay, I don't know what they're called in different countries and stuff, right? But you got this fulcrum, right? And then you've got this board on it, right? Right? As long as these two people are about the same weight and everything, they have lots of fun, right? Teeter-tottering back and forth and all that kind of stuff, right? But you got little kid over here, right? And big kid sits on this, right? What happens? Little kid takes a flight with no in-flight movie or meal, right? Okay. But when we're doing this leverage stuff, every time you're working a leverage or a leveraging technique, which is a lot of catches as well, right? This kind of thing, you are using the fulcrum principle. Okay. So here's what's happening, right? But this is allowed to happen because the fulcrum doesn't move. If these guys are trying to do this thing and the fulcrum is flipping and banging or moving around or sliding across the ground, you don't get anything, right? You get, that's not fun. I'm going to go do something else, okay? So here's what happens when people often do leverages, right? They've got part of the shukiken, right? And again, it should be in this region, okay? Get closer to the hand. Now you got leverage working against you because you're working with something too far away from the strong point. Just like if you're doing mushadori, right? That warrior catch kind of thing, right? The apex, the best point to attack doing mushadori is your radial bone right here because it's the farthest point for both bones. Leverage, okay? If I'm up here, if I'm down here, you have to be bigger, stronger, or be more forceful to make it work, but that's counter to the principles that we're learning, okay? So when somebody's doing this arm bar, right, what we should be doing is moving in a way. See, I haven't moved my arms yet. My arms are moving, I get it, but I'm not doing this. This is just knee, okay, and spine movement. So when I do this, this arm goes back, this arm goes forward. That's leverage, okay? What people tend to do is they either hold this and they push this, which makes them step forward and then kick you or whatever, right? Or if they're backing up with this, right, they pushing forward with this, but what ends up happening, make sure I don't trip over my gear here, right? They move like this. Do you see what just happened? So this is rotating, but it's moving away from their elbow. So they may still be touching it, but they're not creating this. They're creating this. Okay? So leverage, understanding how we're working, why we're touching with certain points on our arm because of the relative connection and position and alignment with muscles, making sure that we're not in weird positions with our hands and arms, right? Using this because it's farthest away from here, right? From the bigger muscle groups, right? We need to make sure we understand that these muscles do this. These muscles do this. When somebody does this, right, they already start to limit how much they can get out of things, okay? Catching, again, just catching, right? So here's a way to catch something. Actually, I'll do some where they combine, okay? When we're doing one form of, let's say we're doing omote gyaku, okay? So the outside wrist reversal, okay? Koto form, sometimes gyoko form, right? Depends on the kihon that you're doing, right? When he grabs and I shift back, right? What people tend to do is go for the hand and then try to work that off. The problem with this is, while I'm fighting for this, either he's going to lock down or he's going to jack me with the other side. The way to keep him from punching me, kicking me, or even being able to step at the same time is to move back in a way that places my forearm, my shuki, right, here against his, right? So I'm applying leverage and guarding at the same time. I'm applying leverage so he gets moved. Now all of his guns are pointing that way. His balance is compromised that way. Moving back into me is very, very difficult. And I've locked his elbow so he can't bend and get his arm back as easily, okay? Then, right, from here, I'm going to shift through it. So now I've got this leverage going on. as he steps to catch himself, that's when I'm walking in the other direction to deliver the, right? But I can guard while catching this region. I'm not leveraging against it at first. I'm stepping back to guard and to capture that region. Then I'm going to break it. But this part captures him because if he tries to turn into me and I have this in the right place, if he tries to turn into me, he'll break his own balance. If we're just doing static training and he hasn't stepped, right, then I can apply leverage. So it can be the same or it can be two different things depending on which one of us moves first. But this guard thing is really, really important, okay? Ichimonji no kata. We all know it. 1, 2, okay? Yes, we all know it. Except I still see lots of people doing it like this. Shoulders wide open, you're going to get torque. You left a big old friggin' opening that this guy can come in on, okay? What I'm doing is catching and moving, right? And the gyoko ryu, right? This comes up here, and then it comes around this way. It stays in front of the helmet, right? And keeps the armor between you and him, okay? It also goes in on a straight line because on the kabuto, the helmet, right? If you don't know what a Japanese helmet looks like, think Darth Vader. Darth Vader's helmet minus the mask at the front. Very Japanese helmet shape, except where he had, I don't know, speakers or whatever the hell he had right here, right? This is open, which is why a lot of our kamae are what they are, because you're putting armor in here to protect against him inserting something in this space and going after your neck. If I insert it and do that, now I can hit this uko. Okay. If I come around and strike this way, it's like hitting somebody wearing a motorcycle helmet. Okay. It's just, you can do it, but I highly discourage you from doing it. Right. So watch my elbow again. Right. 1, 2. This stays in guard position as I move in. This is part of Sanshin. Staying in guard position so he can't pop you while you're moving in. So not just the elbow, shuki, right? Okay, it stays in guard position, right? Another way to do the elbow thing is to do this, right? Like in hi or kano kata, okay? Comes in, catch, shift, and then move in this way, right? So I can catch, shift like I'm coming in to strike him. Meanwhile, he worries about this. He either brings a hand up to jam my elbow or he flinches or whatever. And of course, now because he's looking at my elbow, he gets hit with the other one. Okay. So again, take a look at your kata that have this stuff in it. And what would happen if you were just using it as a strike? Great. What happens if you use it? Okay. More options. More options. I was going to do something else, and what was I going to do with this? That secret. Shit, almost forgot. Okay, sorry. Okay. What all of this came from as I was progressing through my own study, and again, this is a quick, couple of minute explanation to get people started at a 30,000 foot view, right, of the battlefield or whatever. But this took decades to figure out and to get, right? Even though my teachers handed me stuff as well, they didn't put it in this kind of a list, right? This took me figuring things out and trying to come up with ways to help my students get from A to Z, or if you're not in the US, then from A to Z, right? Because I think we're the only ones that say Z for the last letter of the alphabet. Anyway. Right. So this gives you a place to start. Okay. But it doesn't take the place of having somebody there explaining how the leveraging principle works. What are we doing with striking? Right. My new students are introduced to 5, no less than 5 striking angles, right, with the elbow. And I'm just talking about this. Okay. They're also given this kind of thing, right? And we don't do low blocks. Really, what the hell is this in Hicho no Kata then? Anyway, right? So, but then we got to look at it as a backup because we have to have this right and get the timing right, positioning, that kind of stuff, right? If you're dealing with somebody who just runs away, this doesn't work, right? But if this guy's really, really good and just slips to the side and only does a parry to knock your arm away, which is cool because he helps fuel that, right? But learning this helps you now with your evasion so that you can shift and parry or guard in the right place so he can't redirect his elbow if he missed with his fist. Learning these things, the next step up is learning how to counter these things. Okay? All right. So the secret, in the category in the Togakure school, right? The 16, the secret 16 fists of the ninja, right? In this one, I'm going to juxtaposition a couple of words. It's not the secret fist of the ninja, it's the ninja's fist or weapon, right? Secret. Okay. Ninja's fist or weapon secret. This is for all your body weapons, virtually all of them. Okay. And that is that all body weapons have more than one purpose. Okay. Hopefully you're taking notes. Or you can go back and watch the recording. So, all weapons, body weapons, right? Here we are. We can strike with them. We can leverage with them. Lever, grapple, that kind of thing, right? And many have a utility purpose. Right? Here's what I mean. Let's see. Let's use shito. Everybody likes shito, right? Okay. So, shito, obviously, striking. Okay. But it can also strike this way. It can be a substitute for happaken. Okay. Because happaken stings. Surface impact. Using shito or a kitenken, this is a massage therapist hand. When I strike with this, there's less impact to the surface and more of a percussive feel on the inside. But this is also our primary climbing fist, primary climbing hand, because this requires more muscles here and here across the back when we're applying pressure to it. Okay. So it's stronger than this, which only goes to about here at best, right? It's not that you're not using these other muscles to kind of lift yourself up and things like that, but for the surface that you're holding, and you can't always use this, but it's our primary climbing hand, utility, okay? It can also be used for leverage, right? When somebody grabs me, I could slam down on their forearms to make them let go, or I could just place the ridge of this bone against this point right on the inside of the radial bone. It's not on the side, right? It's not on the top. It's about a 30 to 45 degree angle in, right? It's very, very sensitive. And we can just lever through that, right, to break things. Doom, doom, doom. Fudoken, okay, which we tend to not use a lot, right? Believe it or not, Togakure school, Gyoko, Koto, pick one, right? Okay. The preferred method of striking with what most people think of this way is this. Okay, and if we do use this, it's laid out like a koppoken. It's only koppoken if I'm striking this way. Okay, one of the questions my students get for every fist they learn is, how many striking surfaces does that fist have? Okay, so just like the shito, right? This is also a type of shitanken. Okay, so again, how do we do it, right? So with the fudoken, yes, we can pound, back fist, all kinds of things, right? But if he grabs my wrist, I can also lever those knuckles up into those soft bony points here, okay? Utility fist or a utility thing, what is it? Well, it's this freaking hand you use to hold all of your other weapons, but it's also a delivery mechanism, right? For Mitsubishi or anything else that you might have in your hand, okay? So if we can start to see these things this way, okay? Elbows. I already covered 5 different ways to use the elbows, right? Not counting as a prop. Put somebody down on the ground, right? And kind of lay in on them and just relax, right? If I drop my full body weight on them on the point of a knee or the point of an elbow, in one of the schools, it's called Rakudai, thunder from heaven, right? Or I can just move into them and I can lay it on a temple, jaw, or the TMJ right here, ribs, whatever, and just relax my body, right? It's a single point. So now it's just a rest, right? Just kind of recline. Anyway, you get the idea, right? Okay. So that's where I'm going to stop today. But again, we're going to take something super simple. Remember, going all the way back, right? If when we see or hear elbow and our translation stops here, it's not that this is not what most people refer to as the elbow. Because if you say, you're just bump him with your elbow, right? You'll get that, right? But if you're arguing with people because they're using something else or whatever, right? We don't have things like, okay, then somebody's got to go back to the books, right? Or get some other questions answered or whatever, okay? Because historically, remember, pre-Admiral Perry bringing Western anatomical names to body parts, which is how it's laid out in our scrolls, okay? This was a part of this whole region, okay? Changes everything. Doesn't change things just a little bit. It changes everything, okay? And to also understand that in most of our striking, the elbows are critical. They're a vital piece, okay? The way we use our elbows, remember that guard thing right here, okay? Wasn't just guarding against his follow-up from the very strikes that we throw. The reason why we strike like sawing wood is because the elbow, this is a shield that stays in front of forward-moving targets on us and keeps them covered on the way in. If we lift it, we expose things that make it easier for them to get them. And I know, there's some people that are probably watching that are thinking, I'm too fast for that to happen. I'm too good for that to happen. I'm too whatever. Fantastic. I'll just leave everything with pride goes before the fall. Okay? Concept that my teachers, and this is a modern concept that my teachers introduced me to way back in the day, right? You have a choice. You can learn this stuff based on lessons from people who spent 2,000 years studying nothing but warfare, okay? And passing it on and refining it, right? It was a science. You can do that and give yourself the greatest chance, okay? Or you can bet on things that will probably work or might work, or we'll see what happens. They related that to like playing the lottery. Okay? The reason why a lot of us don't play the lottery is because the system that you could use that will guarantee winning the lottery, most of the states and jurisdictions and countries have outlawed that, which is to go get a loan to buy up all or as many tickets as possible in the shortest amount of period, right? And then when you win, you pay back the loan, which will be virtually interest-free, and you pay the people that lined up at all the places to buy the tickets, right? Kind of walk away with a shit ton of money. But you can't do that because they've outlawed it. That is how a ninja would win the lottery. Okay? Because you understand how the system works and what it takes to do it, and you apply leverage and a framework. Does that mean it will always work? No, but it's going to work more often than not. How do I know that? Because this has lasted for well over 2,000 years. Okay? So anyway, that's just for elbows. We'll talk about something else next time. Talk to you. Be safe, train hard.